Hello everyone, welcome back to another video where today we are going to be discussing the insane poll that came out today from YouGov, putting the Greens in second place in a national poll and just 2 points behind Reform UK. This is insane. This is an absolutely wild poll, and it's from YouGov as well. Now, obviously, whenever any poll comes out, people want to talk about the different biases and stuff, and it's obviously important to recognize that no poll is officially going to be 100% accurate. No poll has, with 100% accuracy, nailed on an election result. However, YouGov is broadly, by most political analysts, seen as the definitive polling aggregate, the one that is the most accurate when it comes to gauging how the nation is feeling at the moment. And these results, given that context, are absolutely wild. So we're going to dive right into this. Feel free to subscribe if you're new, that'd be greatly appreciated. We do regular politics content here on the channel. But with that said, let's dive right into it. So this is from YouGov. Our latest voting intention, March 1st to March 2nd, 2026, has the Greens on their highest figure ever recorded by YouGov, significantly ahead of Labour, who are on their lowest figure to date. Reform UK 23%, -1 from 22nd to the 23rd of Feb. Greens 21%, +4, and only 2 behind Reform UK. Conservatives 16%, down 2. Labour 16%, also down 2, and the Lib Dems just static as they have been now for months. The SNP implied on 3 and 1 respectively, but obviously worth considering that they only run, in certain parts of the country, obviously. So, but this is absolutely insane. This is absolutely wild. The most trusted polling source in the country is now saying that it is Reform at the top and Greens in second. This is wild. Neither of the two major parties are in the top 2. In fact, they're joint third behind these two, and not even by a little bit, but by a substantial margin. This is insane, and this really does show that things are changing in UK politics, but I also think this shows a trend that I've discussed in previous videos, which is the continued stagnation and slump of Reform in the polls. Now, I think there's a few different reasons for this. I think one of the key ones is I think that the Trump connection and the similarities to Trump are really hurting Reform UK nationally. I think that even recently with the Gorton and Denton result, them claiming voter fraud and how it's all, been done by postal votes and all that, obviously echoing the Trump strategy, which really doesn't play well to a UK audience. We look at that and we just see that as being a sore loser, being sour grapes and not accepting that you lost. And I think a lot of people are very wary of those kind of Trumpian tactics. I also think as well that obviously Nigel coming out as strongly in favour of the recent kind of war in Iran with America has really alienated a lot of people on the right, because it's not just a left-wing thing this, but on the right saying we don't want to be involved in any more foreign wars. That was one of the main things that Trump actually ran on in 2016, is we're not going to do any more of those foreign wars. And what does he do? He goes and, he goes and starts blowing up stuff in Iran. So I think that that's probably alienated a lot of people. And I think it's no coincidence that Restore Britain, which is Rupert Lowe's thing, has taken the exact opposite stance as Reform have here, where they are against action in that conflict. And the Greens are the only party nationally who are against that conflict as well. So I think that's a huge thing. I also think something worth considering here is that they have run 2 big by-elections. And they have, really hyped these up as the 2 moments that are going to show Reform is actually very popular and, their path to government is basically assured. And in both of those cases, in Caerphilly and Gorton and Denton, in both cases, they lost to progressive left-wing parties. So I actually think that this is probably one of the most accurate things we've had. Reform's still ahead, but only narrowly. The Greens already tailing them, which is insane, by the way, when you consider where the Greens came from. It wasn't so long ago they were below the Lib Dems, and now they are second on YouGov. That is insane. Let me see if I can find how this would go nationally. Okay, yeah, so this is how it plays out in the Nowcast model. This is one poll for now. So obviously you can see here, Reform would get 227 seats. So they would be the largest party with plus 222 from where they are now. But second would be the Greens with 135. The Lib Dems would get 92, a gain of 20. The Conservatives would get 59, down 62 from an already low base. The SNP would get 48, up 39. Labour would be down to 40, down 371 seats. Plaid would be on 20 with plus 16, and others would be on 10, up 5. So obviously, if this was to play out nationally, no party would have a majority. I think it's like 320 odd seats needed for a majority, something like that. So no party would actually be close. And in fact, even if you combine the Reform and Conservative vote, not even that would be enough to get you a majority. I think the only way you could get a government out of this would be to have Greens, Lib Dems, and then I think the SNP and Labour and maybe Plaid. I'm not sure whether I'm doing my numbers right there. The point is, if this came out nationally, it would be an absolute mess. What we are witnessing is the beginning of a multi-party system in a democratic system that predominantly favours two major parties. The question is, are Reform and the Greens essentially going to usurp what the Conservatives and Labour were, where you've got basically two more extreme versions of both the left and the right? And I say that in the sense that, they are more sort of strongly ideologically based than either the Tories or Labour are in their current form. People are sick of just middle of the road nothing. They want something that they can believe in and latch onto, and I think that's why the Greens and Reform are doing so well. People are sick of the main two, they're sick of nothing changing, and I think this proves that. But I also think as well, one of the other reasons, and I've said it for a while, why I think Reform is struggling, is that they are really going to struggle with this perception of just being seen as the Tories, but again, which I think essentially is what they are. But that perception is sticking. Whenever you hear Reform spoken about on the national television or, on the news and stuff like that, there's always those people saying they are just Tories with a different colour rosette. I think it was Mock the Week saying that, they were like the equivalent of when Hermes rebranded to Every. It's still the same terrible postal service, but, in a different branding. And I think that is sticking. Every time Reform are on Question Time, that gets brought up. It gets brought up that they are literally, because they'll make a point about how the Conservatives destroyed the country and they've done all this stuff, which, not wrong, but also then someone will rightly point out, well, hang on, you were part of that government, so how are you supposed to be the one that fixes it all of a sudden? And I think a lot of the general public are looking at that and going, yeah, actually, that doesn't really make sense. And again, I think the proximity between Reform UK and Farage and Trump, and a lot of the UK really does not like Trump. Being seen as Britain's Trump is not seen as a positive thing by a lot of people in the UK. As well as, of course, as much as people want to have a go at the Greens for having appealed to the Muslim vote, if you basically spend your time demonising a huge portion of the electorate, 4 million people, I believe, you're going to lose them. Is it any wonder why they're not going to vote for you? One of the things Trump managed to do, and I despise Trump, but one of the things that campaign did quite effectively was frame it as, no, we're not talking about you. We're just talking about, those types of people. Obviously it was a lie, of course, they meant everyone, but the politics was done very cleverly, whereas now you've got, people in Reform saying that, you can't just, it's not just a passport to be British, or you have to have a white ethnicity to be British and stuff like that. And that is going to alienate Muslim voters. So you can't then turn around and be like, why aren't they voting for us? I don't know, maybe it's because you've made it pretty clear you're not a welcome space for their votes. And I think they are going to struggle electorally a lot because of that perception. And as I said, the support of the Iran war as well, I don't think is a very popular thing in the country. The proximity to Trump, the alienating of, minority voters, as well as, obviously, the perception that they are just Tories too, I think is really hampering their growth. And I do think as well that, the right-wing splinter groups, I don't think Restore Britain is going to, suddenly come along and do insanely well. What I think it will do, though, is it will split the right-wing vote enough to where I don't think Reform will come close to getting a majority. I've said this before, and I will lay that claim now. I don't think any party will get a majority at the next election. I really, really don't. I think that it's going to be something like this, where you have all these different parties split all the vote, and then, assuming everything goes the way it currently is, could there be something that changes it? Yeah, I mean, Labour could announce that they would do a referendum on rejoining the EU, which would kind of change the whole trajectory of this quite substantially, and could even, hurt Reform's great gain even more if that, does well and people vote for that. Similarly with the Tories as well. So still a lot to play for. I think that's one of the things I want to take away from this is a lot of people have been acting for a long time like the next election is already nailed on, like Reform are already, like Nigel's already like measuring up the curtains to number 10 Downing Street. And I think the reality is they're not yet. They're not even close yet. Yes, they are ahead in the polls, but their polls have been slipping, and the only poll that ultimately matters, even though I've done a whole video talking about this, is the one on election day. So when they say, we are the change Britain wants, I'm not so sure whether that's true. And I have said for a while that I think the hype of Reform has been somewhat exaggerated by our media that just will not stop covering them. It'll be interesting now to see, given that the Greens are polling similarly to Reform, whether they will get the same exposure as Reform. Something tells me they probably won't, but we will wait and see. But if you did enjoy this video, please give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I will see you later.